parents taught me the fundamental building blocks, really, of a spiritual life, of an intellectual life. And I feel like the spiritual and the intellectual, they're two sides. It's almost like if you're a biblical person and you think about, was it Joseph? It was somebody else. Paul wrestling with an angel too, right? And so they're wrestling with these angels. Like there's a I think it's from Scandinavia, art piece. Is that what it's called? It's Jacob. That's right, Jacob. That's right. There's an art piece that has Jacob wrestling with an angel, and it's fascinating because they're. I thought about you something. I think the well is more important to me, but that two sides of the spiritual and the intellectual. To me, that's what hip hop is. To me, Nas is the personification of that. Nas, as a hip-hop artist, is articulating what my parents were articulating in their intellectual and spiritual pursuits, but within my generation. And I saw that in Nas and others. So like when I say something don't feel like hip-hop to me, it's because it's missing that thing. There is no wrestling between the spiritual and the intellectual. But when you got that spiritual and the intellectual wrestling together, like you do, that is what I call that's time. That's what I feel like Nas is getting at when he says time is illmatic. You know what I'm saying? That's illmatic. When you ask Nas what he meant by illmatic, he says it's ill beyond ill. You know, like beyond the illest is illmatic, you know what I mean? But in his words and in his craft, he's putting these, it's that slick shit, like my father saying, you might not hear, but I bet you can feel, right? That's the essence of hip hop. You're talking across time, you're speaking multiple languages at the same time, and that's what art at its best is. Art at its best, first of all, is beyond words. You can't capture it in words. The poet Jessica Caremore wrote a book called "The Words Can't Fit in My Mouth," or "The Words Don't Fit in My Mouth," right? And to me, that's what she's saying is like, you can't even put this into words. And so when we're dealing with art, we're dealing on such a high plane of communication, right? Because it's words without words. This is why you got clowns wanting to take over the Kennedy Center. But I tried to go as long as I could without he's just missing the big shoes and the red nose. Okay, but the well, is that place that I feel like is something that you are building in your life. And if you're studying history, if you're listening to all of the influences, the well is this place where you're gathering and you're putting these life lessons that are connecting to you on a personal level, right? And then you're able to go back to that well. When you sit and you think, it's a very contemplative thing, but the well is all you put in there. And it could be, for me, I know I'm at the end. For me, it could be, it's things like Gwendolyn Brooks was an early influence of mine. I used to drive her to, she taught a class at Chicago State, and I would pick her up from her house and take her to her class and sit. And so Hakeem Adabuti, one of my mentors, he was like, hey, I want you to pick Gwendolyn Brooks up, bring her to this class. They had just started a master's MFA, is that what it was? Yeah, and that was called the Gwendolyn Brooks Center. And so I would bring her to her class, and so I was like, yeah, I'll take her, thinking this is no big deal. What I hadn't thought about until the day that I picked her up was, what am I supposed to do until she's done? And how long is the class? It was a 3-hour seminar. So I'm sitting in Gwendolyn Brooks' class for 3 hours. And first I'm like, what is this? But this is, again, you don't know where that stuff is coming from. So you live, you experience, and you take it in, and you make it mean something. And so Gwendolyn Brooks would say to me, you should write every day. She's like, I see you listening to John Coltrane. I bet you John Coltrane picked that saxophone up every day. That's what she said to me. So she's like, you pick that pen up and you write. And I was like, but what if I don't have no publishing? It doesn't matter. She's like, you do it every day. Wow. So one of the things I started doing was I started keeping a notebook. I'm maybe 22. To this day, Dante, I tell you, I walk around with these notebooks that I'm constantly writing, and that's where I get it from. I'll give you a couple others. Bell Hooks was a really good friend of mine. I met Bell when I was maybe 19. We were friends from that point until she passed. And one of the things that Bell Hooks did so many things, but one thing that stands out in my mind, because I know we're out of time. Bell Hooks was very invested in finding intellectualism in unfamiliar places. You know what I'm saying? Like I think about my parents, right? So there was a doorman that Bell Hooks lived in a small town near Berea University. And so I would go down there to visit her and stuff, and she was building the Bell Hooks Center there, but there was a hotel close by, and it was a doorman at this hotel who she would talk to all the time. Sometimes she would be bringing guests, so she'd go over to the hotel, she'd talk to this brother. He was just a regular brother, but what she did that blew my mind was she had an event where she brought Cornel West to Berea. And instead of her being in conversation with Cornel West, she put this brother, the doorman, in conversation with if you ever get a chance to see it, it's absolutely brilliant. So that's something Bell Hooks did. Two more examples, then I'll stop. Sonia Sanchez. Sonia Sanchez, one of my longtime mentors also. I met Sonia, I think I was, again, like in my early 20s, maybe 22 or 23, and we remain friends to this day. She even spent a lot of time talking with my son as he was kind of growing up. But Sonia said to me, and she said it in a documentary. It's a documentary about her or the Black Arts Movement, I can't remember which. But what she said was that, the world that we're trying to build, we may not see it. We probably won't see it, but we work towards that anyway. And along the same lines, I'll end with this. Angela Davis gave a talk at Duke University commemorating the work of John Hope Franklin. If you don't know John Hope Franklin, he wrote an important book called From Slavery to Freedom. He was a historian. Interestingly, John Hope Franklin also was one of some of the old heads kind of were like, yeah, this Black Studies thing, I don't know if we need to be doing this, particularly the historians. Another story. But one of the things that Angela Davis said at this in this talk was she said that a part of our responsibility as writers and intellectuals is to recognize that we may not see the world that we want to exist, but a part of our responsibility is to write about that world, write those ideas, because it may be a generation or two from now that's reading that stuff that will be in a position to implement it. And so I'll just end with that. So that's kind of been my journey. I hope that I captured it. Oh, last slide. I put some stuff up on some of my influence. Some of the people who influenced me. Hakeem Adabuti is, without question, the person that's had the most impact on my intellectual development and thinking. He's in the top corner. Me and him standing there talking together. That was at Penn State University. Next to us with the, I don't know what you call that thing, the black and white picture with the, I don't know what you call those. What do you call that? Screen. Yeah. That's Tony K. Bombara. Tony K. Bombara is just an amazing influence. And again, just an traditional kind of approach to intellectualism. She did plays, she did films, she wrote novels and short stories. Just a multifaceted way in which she was an activist. That's Jessica Caramore looking fly, kind of with the white jacket on. Angela Davis in the bottom, Sonia Sanchez. Beneath me and Haki is Joan Morgan. One of the things I should say is, one of the other things that's really impacted me is to recognize early on, it was an elder who told me this. His brother was in his 90s. I think his name was Usini Perkins. He was a sociologist. And one of the things he said to me, I'll never forget, in that well, was sometimes your peers are your best mentors. And so me and Joan kind of came up together. I was at the Source, she was at Vibe. Same thing, Mark Anthony Neal in the middle next to the top. John Henrik Clarke, another early influence, who also was not formally educated, one of those brilliant black historical thinkers in our history. Beneath him is Gwendolyn Brooks. Beneath her is Lerone Bennett, and Lerone Bennett was the first editor of Ebony magazine and wrote the book Before the Mayflower, which is just a very unconventional way. I didn't even know you could write history in this way. It's such a brilliant book. Next to Gwendolyn Brooks is Gil Scott-Heron, another one of my influences. I actually edited a book by Gil Scott-Heron that we published at Third World Press. And Gil Scott-Heron, so many stories I could tell you, but just a brilliant man. He was also a novelist first. He wrote, I think, 2 or 3 novels. And after he wrote the novels, he decided that they weren't reaching enough people. And that's what led him to music. He already knew how to play the piano. He started learning to play the piano as a young person. So he went back to the music as a way of, I can reach more people by doing this music. He referred to himself as a bluesologist, which I think is a really important distinction. And last but not least, beneath Gil is, in the middle, Carlito Rodriguez, who is a writer that I work with at The Source. I can tell you so much about him, but one of my peers who was an absolute influence, he left The Source and went on to, he does film now in Hollywood. He wrote for Empire as well as The Leftovers. Invincible is next to him on the left, a dope-ass rapper from Detroit who turned down record deals because she didn't want to be the white Eminem, the female Eminem is what she said, because she felt like it was an exploitive thing to do and to try to kind of enter into these black spaces when you knew what the game was. But just a brilliant woman, and you should know who she is. Okay, I'm way over time.